Hello there, in this tutorial I'm going to discuss about OSPF Router ID configuration and assignment. It having a couple of rules. So before configuring it, let's discuss about those rules. The preferred priority, the highest priority to get OSPF router ID is if router ID is configured manually. For example, if network admin configure router ID manually, then it will have the highest priority to have that manual configure ID as OSPF router ID. Then the second priority is if highest IP of the loopback interfaces is used. It means if you create a virtual interface, a loopback interface, and if a highest IP is formed on that or configured in the loopback interface, then it will get the second highest priority to be chosen as OSPF router ID. Then a third number, the third lowest priority is that at third number, if highest IP of physical interface is used, means whatever the highest IP, if it will be of physical interface, then it will be chosen as a OSPF router ID. For example, if the lowest IP of a loopback interface versus the highest IP of physical interface, then also router will choose the lowest IP of loopback interface, and it will configure it as OSPF router ID. If multiple loopback interfaces are created, then the highest IP of those loopback interfaces will become the router OSPF router ID. But the highest number of priority will be if router ID is configured manually. Then the second lowest one will be highest IP of the loopback interfaces, and then the third lowest will be highest IP of physical interfaces. And if the loopback IPs are lower than the highest IP of physical interfaces, then the lowest IP of loopback will be considered as OSPF router ID. If multiple loopback addresses are created and the highest IP of those multiple loopback interfaces will be considered as a OSPF router ID. But the router IP, the highest number of possible chances to become a router IP is, then router IP should be configured manually. So here let me show you about currently this particular network have a OSPF configure. Now show config T and the show IP protocols. Sorry, let me go to controller. Now show IP protocols. Now OSPF is configured. You can see the routing protocol is OSPF 10. The value of AS number is 10, so OSPF 10. Then you can see the router ID. This is what we are going to configure. This is what we're going to discuss. And you can see the number of areas in the router is 1.1, normal 0, stop 0, and the routing of the networks. But the main thing you want to learn about this thing, router information sources, and this particular sources will have a gateway, and gateway will have some values, like 192.168.1.1, 2.1, 3.1. But the lowest value become the the first value become the router ID. You can see router ID 192.168.1.1, but it is configured by default. Whenever we just form a OSPF, just configure OSPF, that value took by the routers by their own, but we not yet configure it by our own. So let me make some changes out there. For example, configuration T, and I have to create an interface loopback, and I want to give a value of a loopback. So it's a virtual IP. Currently it's not yet configured. You can see do show IP interface brief command. Currently no loopback IPs are there, no loopback interfaces are there. So interfaces loopback 1. Now IP address, for example 100.100.100.100, and the subnet mask, let me just give a by default one. So okay, done. Now show IP interface brief command. Now you can see one loopback is created, loopback 1. The IP address is 100.100.100.100. It's manual, and status is up, protocol is up. But if you see the show IP protocol, then you can see that the ID is not yet configured. So we have to give one command, and the command is clear IP OSPF process. So it will clear the past process of OSPF. Yes. And show IP interface brief. So this IP should be shown now. So show IP protocols. As of now, not yet. Okay. You have to give Y and hit enter. Okay, now show IP protocols. Now you can see the values were changed. The router ID, you can see 100.100.100 is changed. Routing of the network is stands 0, and then it's a routing configure the network routing. Now you can see the gateway, which is now the preferred one. You can see. So one thing we did, we created a router ID manually. So always will be preferred. Always will be the first priority value for the router, the ID which you configure. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to configure router ID once again. Let me show you. Now this is the past one, was the loopback ID we've created, but we want to create our router ID manually. So the topmost priority, not time to configure that. So the command is router OSPF, the value is 10, the router ID, for example 2.2.2.2, and you can see they're currently saying the reload or use clear IP OSPF process. So we have to give a command called clear IP OSPF process. Sorry, Control Z. Now, clear IP OSPF process. Now show IP protocols. Now you can see the changes of the router ID. It's now 2.2.2.2, 2.2.2.2, and you can see the information now. Now the first priority values 2.2.2.2, which is we manually created. 100.100.100.100 was the value of a loopback, which is we created, the virtual IP, and 192.168.1.1 was the ID which router thought to be the value to be considered as the router ID. So router thinks that this value is should be the router ID, should be get the priority. 100.100.100 which we created from a loopback, and 2.2.2. which again we created for the manually created for the router ID. So it's the preferred one. Now whatever the value is, it would be we would get the first priority, because this value particular is written by us, written by manually by us. So that's the reason it getting the first priority. 100.100.100 is the value of a loopback, which is again created by us, but it's not preferred one. It's the second most preferred one, second most priority one, and this is the less priority one. You can see 192.168. This values is all about the physical interfaces, and the highest one will win this. So this is how OSPF Router ID is conceived all about. Hope you learned something from it. Thanks for watching.